The Adulting with ADHD podcast is not a substitute for medical advice. Please see a medical professional if you think you have ADHD or have ADHD and need additional assistance. For podcast archives, please visit patreon.com/adultingwithadhd. This is the Adulting with ADHD podcast, self-empowerment for people with ADHD. Today, I'm happy to have with me Melissa Orlov. Melissa is an award-winning author and top expert on the topic of ADHD and marriage. She teaches couples, therapists, counselors, and coaches about how ADHD impacts relationships and offers private counseling. Welcome to the show, Melissa.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Can you share a little bit about your background and how you became a leading voice in this space?
I stumbled into it, which is a success story in its own right. But I had been struggling in my own marriage way back in the early 2000s and we finally figured out my partner had ADHD or has ADHD. And so trying to figure out where the resources were, and there were none that I could find.
Yeah.
And so once we got through all of the fixing things up, I thought, oh, there's probably some other people who could use this. And so I started blogging, which turned into a website, which, because the website took off, turned into a book, which got reviewed by the New York Times. And so that was the beginning of everything starting out. And since then, I have done a lot of worked with Ned Hallowell, learning about the professional side of ADHD and what was known about it at the time that I was studying with him, and done a lot of work on my own. Have spent now decades helping couples and professionals, and it's been rewarding to be able to do that. I'm grateful for it.
It sounds like it could be rewarding. So the first question I had was about times of economic or social volatility. What unique challenges can surface for couples where one or both of those partners have ADHD?
I think, like many of the things that happen for couples impacted by ADHD, the issues are exacerbated by misunderstandings about what ADHD does in a relationship and doesn't do, how the symptoms contribute to issues, but also responses to those symptoms by non-ADHD partners. And so you'll see the same kind of stresses, but sometimes on steroids. So for example, financial stresses, we're about to go, I think, into a pretty difficult time financially for many people. And statistically, people who have ADHD are more likely to lose their jobs for a variety of reasons. And I have a family member who recently got downsized as well, though she's still working. And that can be particularly complicated for couples, in part because looking for another job is a very executive function heavy task. And so it can be really hard. Also, people with ADHD may have issues around feeling like they're imposters or feeling shame about having lost their jobs or something. And that makes a job search more complicated as well. They may not be as ready or eager to reach out to the connections that they have to be able to find a job. And that is the best way to find a job. That's a complicated thing. And then there are also emotional issues in difficult times. So one of the core characteristics for adults with ADHD is emotional lability, or big emotions and not so great brakes on those emotions. And that includes things like anxiety, which would be pumped up during difficult times, depression, sometimes other kinds of emotions. And so if you are unaware of ADHD, you may not recognize that's part of the ADHD, rather than suddenly your relationship is falling apart or something like that. It helps to understand that ADHD may be at play there. And then what you do about it, which we can talk about in a moment, but using ADHD friendly ways to address it. And then there are other issues that stress hurts, things like libido can be a big issue in downtimes, hopelessness. And if couples are feeling if they're deeply in the ADHD, what I call the parent-child dynamic, which means one person is over functioning and one person is under functioning, that can lead to feelings of hopelessness and resentment and the pressures of being in a down economic and difficult emotional time where you don't feel like there's a strong sense of community support that you can go out to. All of that can make things worse. It can be a tough time. It can also be a time of connection as well.
If adulting with ADHD feels overwhelming, you are not alone. ADHD Online provides a diagnostic evaluation that offers personalized insights to help you navigate ADHD and beyond. Aside from ADHD, it's looking at anxiety, depression, binge eating disorder. You can take those results and you can go to your own practitioner, or they are practitioners that can help you. Listeners of the Adulting with ADHD podcast save $40 off and receive a $149 diagnostic evaluation by visiting adhdonline.com/adultingwithadhd.
What are some common misconceptions about building resilience during this period?
It's interesting because I don't think resiliency and misconceptions being in the same sentence. That's a tough one for me to answer. There are ways you need to think about building resiliency, and it doesn't come. Maybe that's a misperception, but I'm not sure people are thinking along those lines. You have to think very carefully about how do what we're doing to respond to what's coming at us. We're in an age where stuff is coming at us 24/7. It's often inflaming and difficult these days. You don't know who to talk to or who to trust, or whether somebody's going to come knocking on your door and take your parents away or anything. You have
Right.
no idea. Everything's up in the air.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thinking carefully about what are the things that a couple can do, and very importantly, how do you not get yourself isolated in the situation, because community support and connections with friends and family members are critically important to having a full and positive life in a difficult time.
Yeah, and I can add a little more color to this question because it's fresh on my mind. There can be a lot of pressure, I feel like, when things are imploding like this, and it's get it together, be resilient. But if your love is strong enough, you'll figure it out. And there seems to be a lot of pressure to muscle through it. Yeah.
No, that's a bad idea. Love conquers all you need is love, all those kinds of things. It's not true. I've worked with plenty of couples who really loved each other deeply and couldn't figure out how to live together. Are definitely myths. And the idea that you can power through it, yeah, you need to pull up your pants and step into the ring. But the way that you step into the ring is really important. It's not about, I'm going to put my head down and power through it. And particularly for people who have ADHD, if you have an interest-based brain or a reward-based brain, things like hunkering down and struggling through it take much more energy and effort than often is a good value use of your time or creates success. That's not a way that ADHD people function. I'm going to grind through it no matter how awful it is. Oh no, unless there's a huge sense of urgency or something, which in an extended period of difficulty like the one that we're in right now, it's not a sense of urgency, it's a sense of overwhelm. And overwhelm, it can shut people down. So we don't want that.
Absolutely. Let's go back to these problems during economic volatility. You said you had a couple of strategies couples can think about right now where they're at.
Yeah, there are some different arenas. We talked about the financial one. There are some financial strategies. Be aware that one of you or both of you, ADHD partner, might have a job at risk in this time, because lots and lots of people do. Be conservative about how you do things financially. Don't go out and buy something that you have to put a lot of credit against. If you can avoid it, sometimes you can't. Be a good strategy is to be a little bit more conservative. That takes a conversation in a couple, particularly if you have an impulsive partner, to make sure that everybody's on board and that you have a way to do that. There are good ways to put money aside where you're not tangibly having to make that decision every month. If you're in a job, for example, that can allow you to set aside some money. That's one thing. If somebody is unemployed, consider getting help for the person who's unemployed. If they need assistance putting together a resume or making the calls or staying organized, don't be afraid to pay for some assistance for that. It'll probably pay off to get that assistance. There's the emotional realm. I don't know if you think of other things that are in the financial arena that are of interest to you.
No, that is such good advice to hear right now. That really tracks with me. But go on.
Okay.
I'm
The emotional side of things. In a high stress, you're going to blow up faster or feel more anxiety or feel more hopelessness. The things that you used to be able to tolerate, you might not be able to tolerate.
Mhm.
For people who have ADHD, the high volatility can be part of their ADHD. And rather than say, leave me alone, time, a good strategy there is to try to overtly address any kind of emotional volatility or big emotions that you're having, including anxiety or depression, coexisting kinds of things. You would do that with a professional, with some professional assistance, explaining to them that you have ADHD. For those who feel comfortable using medications, there are medications that can help with emotional volatility and anger management, those kinds of things. And those are not necessarily the same medications that people would use to improve their focus or executive function skills. They're antidepressants, some of which are better for people with ADHD than others. Working with somebody who understands that Wellbutrin is probably a better choice than Zoloft is useful. And then there are things that you can do within the relationship or within the household that help with the emotional stuff. One is get good has a very positive impact on ability to manage your emotions. You may need to schedule that. Lots of people with ADHD, there's an interesting bifurcation. Either really love to exercise because it feeds all the chemistry, or really don't like to exercise because it's too much work. But if you're in that latter category, maybe trying to schedule a regular time to at least get out and walk and get blood flowing through your brain. And 20 minutes of a good brisk walk a day can really improve your emotional stuff.
I am the sunlight, being around plants, all of it cumulatively, it really helps in my personal experience.
Yeah. And then there are things that you can do to connect as a couple. That's really important. There's 3 areas: the financial, the emotional in general, and specifically for the ADHD partner. And then the third area is the connection area. And there, it's about slowing down enough to attend to each other, which can be hard. If you've got ADHD, and particularly the distractible thing where there's lots of stuff coming at you all the time, it can be hard to slow down. And one of the ways to help support that is to ritualize some of the slowing down. So maybe you have a time at dinner, for example, where cell phones are elsewhere and the two of you are talking about something you're grateful for or that you appreciate.
We do roses and thorns at dinner time.
There you go. That's a good sure that you have during every day where you get appreciation expressed towards each other. The roses and thorns idea is a great way to think about what you're grateful for, what you're really struggling with, let each other into your personal lives. And then the idea of some kind of appreciation. The thing I most appreciate about you today is, and finishing the sentence, right, before you go to bed or something like that. People sometimes are on different bedtime schedules when ADHD is one person has it, one person doesn't. And I usually say if it's possible for the person who's the later to bed person to actually get ready for bed and get into bed to have a talk or to read books together. And then when the early to bed person turns out the lights, you can get back up and go do something different, but at least you've had that connection time, which I think of as a sacred bedtime hours. A couple things. You can create these rituals, and you can also include date night is a connection ritual. And if you are creative about that you're doing new and interesting things, so that it's not going out to dinner someplace. And also maybe you don't have the money to spend on going out for dinner. Maybe it's a walk in your local town or in the woods, going to volunteer for a shelter or whatever it is that you might do together. And it was really fun. We really enjoyed it. And we never knew what we were going to do. And it was great. So slowing down enough for those. And then if you have feelings of anxiety, feelings of resentment, difficult things that you're hanging on to, problems with your sex life, which are usually the sort of canary in the mine for larger issues, don't be afraid to get professional help. And that can be hard to find. And in a financially difficult time, that can be hard to work out, but it's useful if you can find somebody who understands ADHD. That's important for
Yeah.
that part of it. So those are some of the strategies.
A lot of those track for me. I know that date night thing. I'm glad you said keep it fresh, because I remember being so proud of ourselves that we were going to date night, but then it ends up being part of the routine if you don't add some spontaneity to it. That piece of it is so important.
It has to be date night. People talk about it that way, which I
Right.
understand.
Yeah.
But I'm perfectly delighted to do date morning, date breakfast, date
Yes.
coffee, date bike ride, date whatever it is,
Absolutely. Yeah.
so that, you are doing something. I've had a lot of people, they do something, they sign up for a dance class, or they learn how to rollerblade, or they go for a bike ride, or whatever it is. That sounds fun. There's some research
Yeah.
that suggests that one of the things that connects couples the best is doing something that's new and challenging for the couple. They're on new turf. They get to explore it together, and it makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. I really enjoyed this conversation. Before we sign off, I wanted you to let the listeners know where they can keep up with you and all the work that you've been doing.
I have a website,
Mm-hmm.
adhdmarriage.com,
Mm-hmm.
and it has a ton of resources for couples. It's really focused on couples. And I do have a seminar, which I've been giving for many years now and improving all along the way. It's quite a good one. It's 9 weeks long. And I think it serves a great function to help get couples onto the same page and start to
Mm-hmm.
working on their issues and figure out where their hot spots are. So I always recommend that for couples who are trying to figure out what to do next. But I have other things as well there, so they can always go to my website.
Wonderful. Thanks again, Melissa.
You're welcome, and thanks so much for the opportunity to talk to you.
Absolutely.